Hi, welcome back. So now over on the session stage, we are holding a startup showcase where they're exploring how to untangle the data yarn from text to business knowledge. This is with Elovisa Sembenico, the CEO of Integral AI. And here, for our final session of the day, we are delighted to welcome back Ivana Bartoletti, the co-founder of Women Leading in AI Network. And today she'll be presenting on automated decisions. What are the ethical and legal implications for the financial sector? Welcome back, Ivana.
Much and really great to be with you again. I just had an amazing session talking about the future and the present and the future of artificial intelligence in financial sectors and what is happening. And it's really good to hear, I think, a shared concern around the fact that consumers and customers, they seem to be particularly keen on wanting transparency around the products that we put out there. And when I mean transparency, I just don't talk about the explainability of an algorithm. I'm talking about transparency in the wider sense. And I wanted to really start with this because I think this is the first point that I really wanted to make when we talk about automated decisions, the use of AI in financial services, especially in an area like finance, where we are using artificial intelligence in many different ways, but consumers trust in the products that in the organizations and in the products that we are that are being deployed is absolutely essential. So what I want to do in the next 15 minutes is to navigate you through what I think the main issues in relation to regulatory concerns, privacy and data protection and legal in the design and by design is crucial to achieve that trust that we need. And before we do that, I just wanted to start by saying to you why I think this is happening right now. So what is happening at the moment, and especially over the last few years, is that everyone is waking up to the politics, as I call them, the politics and geopolitics of data. And this is happening very strongly, especially over the last few months in particular. I mean, it happened before, for example, with big data breaches or situations like Cambridge Analytica. But what is happening over the last few months and with the pandemic on the one end, where we've seen that there is that the data is becoming more and more a great public asset because it's what we need in order to be able to gather information and be able to defeat the pandemic. But we have to do so in a way which respects dignity and human rights when it comes to the sharing of data. But also, for example, what happened in the UK with the A-level scandals, where the A-levels result, which is an exam the students have to take in order to get their admissions to university, the A-level results, because the students couldn't go to school, the exam was replaced by an algorithm, and the algorithm was favoring students coming from private education rather than students coming from state education. So why am I saying this? Because there is a new alert, there is a new awareness, and it's really important that financial institutions really understand what is happening at the moment and why they have to put trust, privacy, ethics by design and legal design in at the heart of what they're doing. So this is and be accountable for it. So this is my number one point that I really wanted to make. So if we look at what's going on in finance at the moment, I think what we are seeing is some really positive benefit around what artificial intelligence, what automated decisions are bringing into the financial services. First of all, what we are seeing is an increased participation of individuals and customers. And that is thanks to the proliferation of the peer-to-peer platform, which is and the security which is being given around them. The second one is the possibility to really close the advisory gap and to really provide more financial support, more advisory function to customers and clients that wouldn't otherwise have access to that. And the third one is in my view the fact that we are really seeing a lot of products from compliance to back office operations that can really streamline operation, and that means that they can allow more financial outlets and financial products to operate, and this is because we are reducing the operational cost of financial in financial institutions. And certainly in my day job as a privacy director, as a director for privacy and at the consulting firm Deloitte, I can really see the work that we're doing as supporting this from happening. So I'm going in a little bit into more details. So when it comes to access to finance, the way that there is the positive effect that we're seeing on customers is the leveling up, and the fact that robot, for example, advised and personalized digital investments can be provided at low cost, and this is really important. But also we are streamlining the KYC, the CDD, and all this can definitely lead to increase in market competition. So, for example, we're seeing more and more tools looking at whether images used to identify documents can match one another, or where, for example, we can calculate risk. So the risk scores on which firms then determine which individuals have access to finance. And we are seeing a lot of new products coming into the market to look at vulnerable customers, which is really important because there is an obligation placed on financial institutions to support customers which may end up vulnerable especially in the current climate with the pandemic. And so we're seeing products coming in support of institutions to identify vulnerable customers at an earlier stage, therefore being able to wrap some support around them, which is really important at this moment. But I wanted to really focus for a moment on what I think the main issues concerning the algorithmic decision making and artificial intelligence are, and ethical regulatory concerns are, and how organizations can really go about them and making sure that they are accountable to customers as well as to regulators in a time where we are seeing an increased debate around governance and tools for accountability of artificial intelligence. We're seeing this with the European Union working on rules and regulations surrounding AI coming in a new year. In the UK, for example, the Information Commission has released an algorithmic framework to audit AI systems through the GDPR and against the GDPR, and we are seeing similar guidance coming across other places as well. But at the same time, once we've got a privacy angle, we also see financial regulators really trying to understand how to make sure that the concept of fairness as well as explainability are then understood from a financial conduct and a regulatory perspective. And then one of the things that I would be really nice to see moving forward is a stricter cooperation, a stronger cooperation between regulators in the financial services and the data protection area. So first of all, one of the things that we're seeing is the technical and legal opacity around algorithms and decision making, which is problematic, and the sort of the technical opacity that is making it difficult for consumers to really build that trust that we need in order for these tools to be successful, and so we need to so that is one element that I think is really, really important. Then we're seeing discrepancies between regulators in an exercise that we have run at Deloitte not long ago, looking at the support for vulnerable customers. We have seen that there are areas where the areas of total convergence. So, for example, the support to vulnerable customers is definitely an area of great converges, but obviously there are some areas where there is more discrepancies, and that could be around, for example, data minimization, the area of repurposing. There are some areas where I think it's really important to incorporate the customers, the organizations need to incorporate different set of requirements coming from different sets of regulators. Then obviously we're seeing the issues of bias and unfairness, especially in credit scoring, where historic data, which is not neutral because it represents a picture of society as it is right now. So bias, so we're seeing bias creeping in through historic data being used, but not just historic data, but also discrimination by proxy, and against which the current legislation around discrimination, especially indirect discrimination, could be leveraged with some limitations. Then we've seen a big power asymmetry, which is the fact that we are a lot of these tools that can be deployed by the financial institutions, they can leverage a huge amount of data, for example, to determine whether somebody is worthy to receive credit or not. And this is because there is access to a huge amount of data coming, for example, from utility or coming from social media, but there is a little control sometimes that the individuals may have around these issues. Then we have the accountability, eligibility, contestability around decision making, where we are seeing a little bit of confusion around transparency and accountability and explainability of the systems, where especially when it comes to supporting clients and customers who are more vulnerable, sometimes explainability, where it becomes too technical, whether it resolves, for example, in disclosure of potentially a code or a very technical explanation, would be able to fail exactly the people who needed transparency the most, if that transparency is explainability. So a lot of work that organizations need to do is really to understand what is this explainability, what it means in a particular context, and what is that customers need to be explained versus, for example, what is that a regulator needs to be explained, or what is, for example, that the person operating that system needs to be explained, and really understand different degrees of this explainability and this transparency. And I always say we need to work from the explainability towards the sort of from transparency to explainability, with steps in the middle, like, for example, the interpretability of a particular decisions using language which customers are able to understand. And the other element that we're seeing, which is concerning from a privacy standpoint, is really related to privacy and data protection, and it's really related to informational rights and the right of access that individuals have about the data that is used to make decisions about them. And this is really, really important, and it is important for two reasons. One, because obviously this access rights, they remain strong and valid, and when we use automated systems, then we have to be able to provide customers with information about their data. But at the same time, because there is a very difficult area that needs to be balanced, and this is between the access rights and the privacy and security by design. And a lot of organizations I work with, they are very keen to introducing very strong privacy and security by design, and new techniques, for example, in order to be able to safeguard the data of the customers. But a balance needs to be found between the access that we need to provide customers to their, how we as organizations are handling their data, and at the same time the privacy and security by design. And sometimes, there has to be a balance that needs to be found there. I just want to conclude on a couple of other issues that I'm in my sort of work with organizations I'm finding, and one is in relation to the sort of predictive technologies that often financial institutions are using in order to be able, for example, to predict whether somebody is going to be in a particular situation of vulnerability, or whether, for example, some indicators can provide some certain some characteristics of an individual. And I think this is where I am seeing some really complex debate that organizations in the financial service industry are having in relation to the wider sense of privacy, in terms of predictive technology often being these algorithms often being able to construct the relationships between the past, the present, and the future by the way in which they operate. So I think it's really, very important that when organizations look at predictive technologies in the financial services industry, they're able to produce this sort of very strong case and governance, and wrapping some really solid governance around the systems that they decide. And the final point that I wanted to make was in relation to the legal basis for processing data, because this is where I often see some really serious confusion for example, in between the sort of between legitimate interest, between consent, and between other legal bases. Some of them, for example, a legal obligation that a financial institutions may have in relation to, for example, identify vulnerable customers or support customers. But at the same time, the legal basis remains a very complex area for some organizations. And I really, this is like a very important thing in my view is we've got to really be really careful, especially when it comes to the user consent and what customers are consenting to, because because consent is not an easy route, and obviously it's very difficult, and especially in the sector like the financial services, when we're looking at integrating a vast number of data sets coming from different areas and different it's very difficult to be able to use this consent as a legal basis, and especially when we are looking and repurposing the data moving forward. And that's where we need to be really careful, and especially when we deploy third-party organizations and doing so. So this is just an overview of what are the privacy and ethical concerns that organizations are having at the moment. And I think this is really important because we need to be able, if we want these organizations to work and to work successfully, we definitely need to be able to prioritize what consumers are going to get out of this technology. So this was a very large review. What is really important, and I'm going to close on this, what is really important for organizations to do is to adopt a privacy, a security, and an ethics by design approach to the governance of the deployment and the development and the deployment of financial services products using artificial intelligence. So and this is like a very important thing that organizations need to do. And I think if we get this right, then I think we will be able to leverage artificial intelligence in financial services moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ivana. I really love hearing about consent, and I really think the framework around that and the education around that is such an important area on both sides, you know, when it comes to the customers and the institutions. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here today. And that's a great way to come to the end of our program today.